Welcome back to the deep dive, where we dig into some really cool research and kind of try to figure out what's going on. Today, we're looking at a preprint. It's got a long title, From Idea to Implementation, Evaluating the Influence of Large Language Models in Software Development, an opinion paper. But I think the easier way to think about it is, what are the experts saying about AI and, specifically these LLMs, these large language models, and how they're going to change the way we build software. So it's like peeking into the future of coding, looking at how these models are being used to write code, find those pesky bugs, and maybe even, create documentation, things like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You've probably seen a lot of buzz about AI, right? LLMs are really driving that way. It seems like they're being used everywhere, and software development is definitely not being left out. This paper tries to cut through the hype. It brings together opinions from a bunch of experts, researchers, and folks actually working with this stuff to give us a better sense of what LLMs can do for software and what challenges they bring. And, one thing that jumps out right away is that there's a lot of optimism. A lot of people think LLMs can make us way more productive and help us code faster. But at the same time, they're also aware of some potential downsides, like, becoming too reliant on these tools and figuring out the ethical side of things.
Okay. Let's break it down for everyone listening. So the paper starts by kind of setting the stage. Why is this research important right now? And it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty around LLMs and what they mean for software development. I mean, there's some big questions, right? Will AI take over coding jobs? What does this mean for students who are just learning how to code? And ultimately, what are the real advantages and disadvantages of using LLMs for software? So the authors had this central idea, this hypothesis that experts in the field are generally positive about LLMs and their role in software development.
Right. And to really get to the bottom of that, they focused on two main questions. And I think these are questions that a lot of people have too. First, what are the main things LLMs can do in software development? And what are the benefits, according to the experts? And second, what are the potential limitations and things we should be worried about? What could go wrong? So to answer these questions, the researchers did these loosely structured written interviews with 11 experts in machine learning and AI. This group included people from academia and people from the industry, so they got a good mix of perspectives. It's interesting, though, when two people analyzed all the responses to, find common themes, their agreement wasn't super high, which kind of tells us that this is still a pretty new area and there are a lot of different opinions on what it all means.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's dive into what these experts actually said, broken down by, the different ways they see LLMs being used or how they could be used in the future. The first one is code generation. And it seems like there's a lot of excitement around how LLMs can actually help write code.
Definitely. A lot of the experts talked about how LLMs can seriously speed up the development process and make it easier to, pick up and use new technologies. So let's say you're working on a project and you need to use this library, right? But it's written in a language that your team's not really comfortable with. One expert gave an example of using LLMs to translate code from Scala to Python. That's a pretty cool example of how these tools can break down language barriers. And then there's GitHub Copilot. You've probably heard of that. Mm-hmm. It was mentioned as a real-world example of how you can get code generated automatically just from writing comments in plain English. It's almost like having, an AI partner who can understand what you're trying to do and write the code for you, and the ability to translate between different programming languages. That was a big one too, because it means you can collaborate more easily and reuse code more effectively.
And it's like, this is where things get really, really interesting if you think about the future of coding. One expert even talked about these more advanced techniques like retrieval augmented generation, that's RAG, and cutting-edge model architectures like Mixture of Experts or Mixtral. Mixtral is really fascinating. It's like having all these different expert submodels within a bigger model, and each submodel is specialized in a particular task. So you can imagine how this could lead to much more sophisticated and powerful code generation in the future. And it's not just about writing code from scratch. The paper also talks about AI tools like Builder.io that can take a design mockup and automatically turn it into working code. And then there's the whole emergence of no-code AI application development platforms like Imagica. This could empower people who don't know how to code to build their own applications. And then there's also the rise of open source models like Alpaca and Lama. This is making this technology more accessible to everyone. Companies can now build their own custom LLMs. It's really changing the game.
It really is. It's amazing to see how fast things are moving. Not too long ago, even moving code between slightly different coding styles was a huge pain. And now LLMs are doing it pretty well. And the examples of generating control code from those industrial piping diagrams, even if they need a little bit of tweaking, you have to be careful about how you instruct the AI, they still show a lot of potential, especially for very specific fields. This suggests that we're going to see more and more LLMs that are tailored for specific industries and coding tasks. I mean, the possibilities are huge.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on. The paper talks about how LLMs are improving natural language understanding for developers. And this seems like a key piece of the puzzle, right? Because it's all about connecting what we want software to do with the actual code that makes it happen.
Yeah, exactly. The experts really emphasized how LLMs can help improve communication and understanding within development teams. And I'm sure you've experienced this yourself if you've worked on any, complex projects. It can be a real challenge to keep everyone on the same page. So imagine a new engineer joins your team, right? Instead of spending days or weeks trying to decipher legacy code or tons of documentation, they could just ask an LLM to explain it in plain language. And the paper talked about how LLMs can be integrated with tools that you might already be using, like JRA for project management and Google Docs for documentation. This could really streamline things like planning sprints and writing technical specs. So the main idea here is to use models like GPT-3 and BERT to bridge that gap between, human language and computer language.
Okay. And then there's the whole area of code review and quality assurance.
Yeah.
The paper digs into how LLMs are being used for that. So for our listeners, this could mean more reliable software, fewer bugs.
Exactly. The experts see LLMs as being able to fill some really crucial gaps when it comes to making sure code is high quality. And in some areas, like medical device development, where mistakes can have, really serious consequences, LLMs could be really important for reducing risks because they can provide a much more thorough and consistent review process. Some of the benefits they talked about were things like automated checks for coding standards, making sure everyone's code looks the same, automatically generating comments to explain the code, finding potential security vulnerabilities, and even learning from past feedback to, become more accurate at reviewing code in the future. And they even mentioned specific LLM models that are designed for code review, like ChatGPT and Encoder. And they gave examples of how you could prompt these models to, find and fix bugs. So this is already happening. These tools are being used in the real world.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The paper also talks about collaborative software development with LLMs. So how are these models changing the way teams work together? How could they make our own collaboration smoother?
It seems like there are a lot of advantages for CI/CD workflows, so that's continuous integration and continuous delivery. LLMs can automatically generate realistic test data and create those unit and integration tests based on the actual business logic. So that leads to more efficient and comprehensive testing. They can also help force version control standards, by checking those commit messages and making sure the project history is consistent. And that's really crucial for larger teams working on complex projects. A big point they made was the integration of LLMs into pair programming, using tools like GitHub Copilot. And their surveys showing that developers who use these tools, they actually code faster, they're more satisfied with their jobs, and they even experience less mental fatigue because they can offload some of the more tedious coding tasks to the AI. So it could really change the dynamics of how teams go together.
There's even a section on LLMs and predictive analysis in software development. It sounds like these models can use all the data they've been trained on to offer insights that could help us, make better decisions during development.
Yeah, that's right. One expert pointed out that LLMs can give you those smarter code completion suggestions because they take into account the entire context of your code base. They're not just looking at keywords like those older tools. And there's even the possibility of using LLMs to help set objectives and key results, those OKRs, for an entire company. And they would do that based on, the company's collective knowledge and how they performed in the past. So it's almost like using AI to inform strategic planning and goal setting.
Okay. So we've covered a lot about how experts see LLMs being used. What are the key takeaways for our listeners, like the main points they should remember?
So first, it's pretty clear that LLMs have a huge potential to make software development much more efficient, and they can automate a lot of those tedious tasks that developers have to do. But second, while there's a lot of excitement about these possibilities, the experts also point out that there are some limitations, and there are some things we need to be careful about. And third, to really get the full benefits of LLMs, we're going to need to see some advancements in the technology itself. We need these tools to be reliable and trustworthy. And finally, it's likely that the roles within software development teams will change as AI becomes more integrated into our workflow.
And what about the broader picture? What are the implications of all this for our listeners, thinking about the tech world and beyond? How could these trends shape the future?
Well, we're probably going to see software projects being completed much faster, and the cost of development could go down. And these AI-powered no-code and low-code platforms, they could really democratize software creation. So more people will be able to build applications without needing to learn how to code in the traditional way. The skills that software engineers need are going to change. They'll need to be good at using and guiding these AI tools. And I think the lessons we learn about integrating AI in software, both the good and the bad, are going to be applicable to other industries as well. It's not just about software.
Yeah, a lot to think about for sure. Okay, it's time for our novel notion segment. Based on this paper, what's a potential future research direction that you think is particularly interesting, something that really jumps out at you?
Well, given how good LLMs are getting at understanding and generating code, one area that seems really ripe for exploration is LLM-driven agile evolution. So imagine LLMs not just helping with coding or reviews, but actually being part of the entire agile development process.
Whoa, like an AI that's actually part of the Scrum team? That's pretty wild. Tell me more.
Yeah, so think of an LLM that can analyze user stories and then generate those initial drafts of the code. And then it could automatically create all those unit tests based on the user stories. And it could even participate in those sprint retrospectives by analyzing, all the team communication data to find bottlenecks and areas where the team could improve. And it could even predict potential technical debt based on code patterns and the project history. So this goes way beyond what LLMs are doing now. And it could lead to much faster and more efficient agile workflows. But it also raises some interesting questions about how human developers would fit into this, Would we be more focused on high-level design and oversight? It's a future where the way we do agile development might be completely re-examined because of these powerful AI capabilities.
It's a really thought-provoking idea, and it highlights how AI could change not just how we write code, but how we organize and manage software projects. I mean, the pace of innovation is incredible.
It really is. LLMs are powerful, and they're advancing really quickly. They have the potential to transform software development, but it's important that we keep exploring what they can do and what new possibilities they create.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, it's important to think about how these advancements might affect your own work and the whole tech landscape. If you want to learn more about the experts' perspectives, check out the paper we've been talking about. You can find a link in the description.
And remember, these novel notions, they're just starting points, They're inspired by current research. But the actual path of how technology develops is always full of surprises.
Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Join us next time as we explore another fascinating piece of research right here on The Deep Dive.